Hey, I'm Rick.
And I'm Andy.
And this is
Been There, Tap That.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Been There, Tap That. We're here at Vancouver Island Brewing in Victoria, BC with Chris.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad, man. Glad you guys could come out and see all the changes that we've gone through over the last little while.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. Amazing. Chris, why don't you fill us in as to your role here at VIB, Vancouver Island Brewing?
I am the marketing director here at Vancouver Island Brewing. I was brought on in 2016 to be a major part of the rebrand and kind of refresh of what was a declining 30-plus-year-old brewery. And so, went through an interesting go with a first somewhat failed rebrand. Took the brewery in a bit of a weird direction that I don't think was, the right choice for where it needed to go, and addressed that fairly quickly. And here we are today, kind of back on the upswing for the first time in about 7 years. Vancouver Island Brewing is growing, not shrinking.
Awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, well, Chris, if you wouldn't mind, you want to take us back through the history and take us possibly all the way back to the Island Pacific Brewing days, if you could.
Yeah, well, the brewery originally started as Island Pacific Brewing, and it was up in Saanich. And it was there until about 96 when it moved over here. I believe the name change happened in the early 90s, but I'm not exactly positive on that. We've had we still have some employees from those very early days. Mike, our lab tech, has been with the brewery for 31 years, so almost the entire time. And it's been an interesting situation for us to come in and experience a brewery that has so much history and has so much heritage. I mean, we had a 10-year run, and then moved to this location and have had 25 years here pretty much. So, roughly. And it's interesting that the tenure of the original brewery is longer than most breweries in existence today in BC. And then you add on another 25 years on top of that in this, what is a much larger craft brewing facility. So it's been an interesting go. We've had some unique quirks, like we've only really had German brewmasters the entire time. Current one is Ralph Pitroff, who's been with us for 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. Fantastic brewer, and definitely one of the reasons why we make what I think is some of the best lagers in the craft brewing scene in the province.
Let's go back a little bit to the original brewmasters of VI.
Yeah. I mean, first we obviously started with Herman, which was the namesake of Herminator and Herman's Dark Lager. And he was a German brewmaster to the key, which is why we have our starting lineup was two regular pale lagers and a dark lager. And this brewery was a lager brewery pretty much right up until they made Piper's Pale Ale, which eventually became the flagship of the brewery. Yeah. But we've always had a very strong German heritage. After Herman was ready to move on, we picked things right up with Wolfgang, who, if you can't tell, is a German as well, and then from Wolfgang to Ralph. So throughout the entire time, we've had a deep-rooted German heritage, which is actually something that's very, I originally remember asking, I was like, is there a large German population here on the island when I first got here? And it turns out there is. There's kind of our German heritage is almost linked with the islands itself. So now currently we also have brought on Danny Seaton, who's very not German, but he is working closely with Ralph to kind of help us both maintain that German heritage. We'll get a little bit more into becoming a modern craft brewery. Like for a long time, Vancouver Island Brewing was a little stagnant in its recipe development and innovation pipeline. It kind of leaned on its past success a little heavily. So you would kind of see the holy trinity of Piper's, Sea Dog, Herman's sort of everywhere, and then Herminator once a year, but that was about it. And the industry kind of passed Vancouver Island Brewing by and was in decline for a number of years. And so one of the things when it was sold to a gentleman by the name of Bob McDonald, who also happens to own Muskoka Brewing in Ontario, one of the goals was to, kind of bring this great brand back to life and make it relevant within not just brewing, but the craft brewing scene here in BC. And so Shortly after I joined up to work on some of the marketing and the branding, Danny Seaton joined us from Parallel 49, and he brought a lot of that recipe development and more modern brewing techniques in order to get us stuff like our Broken Islands Hazy IPA, which is quickly becoming one of our #1 brands, and nice. Kind of our innovation pipeline, which we call the Title Series.
And for good reason. That's a dynamite beer.
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
All right, we're here with Danny Seaton, production manager of Vancouver Island Brewing. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So, tell us, how long have you been brewing for? What got you interested in brewing?
Cheap beer in university, and
Isn't that how it always goes?
Yeah.
That seems to be the consensus every person we talk to.
so I went to UBC for undergrad, and my mom used to homebrew wine when I was a kid, so I'd already been around brewing for a bit. My dad's high school buddy was one of the owners at Old Dale Brewing, so I grew up with craft beer in the fridge at home, which was pretty special now that I have to think about it. But yeah, started brewing in university.
So how long have you been brewing for?
Oh, that's a great question. It makes me do math.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, probably nine years of like really intensive home brewing before I started pro brewing, and kind of once I started doing it professionally, you're just tired and you're hot and sticky at work, and you don't really want to go home and home brew that much. There's some weirdos out there that do it full time and home brew, but I'm not one of those.
Go home and get into the lab and just brew until wee hours. I'm always interested in homebrew because that's just, it seems that every brewer that we talk to has, started homebrewing at some point or another. What was your favorite kind of homebrew to make?
Well, I'm an old English lady, so really it's just disguise. English milds, English bitters, those were, I used to brew them for when exam season came, because I could just sit in my room and drink a 2.5% mild all day and study.
And you were an actual graduate?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I did make it through. It was a little dicey a couple times, but when those IPAs came on, then the marks would kind of waver a little bit.
So how long have you been here at Vancouver Island Brewing?
So I started here late 2016, so it's coming out to 3 years in October.
Danny, won't you fill us in on hectoliters and what the actual brewery pumps out on a annual basis, I suppose?
Yeah, so when I started, we hit 12,000 hectoliters that first year. The brewery had their peak about 7 years ago. They hit 25,000, which is pretty big. That was a lot of Islander lager, a lot of Pipers, a lot of Herman's Dark lager. This year, we're looking to crack 15,000, which is pretty. It's not the biggest growth I've ever had to deal with at a brewery, but it's definitely something new for our facility and just our team. When you're in a growth mode brewery, brewing is very different than if you're static or you're losing a little bit of volume. You become very focused on efficiency, cost of goods, things like that.
Yeah, that's true. Where do you guys try to source most of your ingredients from? Is it a local thing or being the amount that you guys produce?
So yeah, I was at Parallel 49 before. I was a brewer there for lead brewer for 4.5 years. We always use the Canada malting, Superior Pils and Superior Pale were the base malts we use there. So when I came here, they were using Prairie Row, which I'm not a big fan of. When really you're a lager brewery that's making very pale lagers with almost nothing in it except base grain, and you want it to be a premium beer, you got to use some pretty nice base grain. So we moved over to Superior Pils, which is great because it's siloed in Vancouver, so it's easy to get shipments of it.
So, Vancouver Island Brewing expansion, is there anything in the works to be able to facilitate different kinds of beer in this facility?
So yeah, right after I started, we were still DE filtering like old school, super bright beers. We put in the centrifuge, which was a lot of fun. Same centrifuge, Driftwood and Phillips and P49. I think Central City's got a slightly bigger one, but that's pretty great equipment for craft beer. Now, if you want to make hoppy beers the way our customers and consumers want them. So when we brought in the centrifuge, that was probably the first big change. And really when I started, cans started kind of going nuts. Again, this is a brewery that's famously made a lot of bottles. We have our own bottle washer on site, so we get bottles from the depot, wash them and fill them all at the same time. It's very laborious and costs a lot in chemicals, but pretty neat, recycle, reuse. Bottles are just dropping out of the market from kind of what we've seen in our sales, and cans are just exploding, and craft beer in cans is acceptable now. which again, when we all started drinking craft beer, it was not.
So Danny, take us through the equipment and all the pertinent pieces of gear that you have here that makes this wonderful beer that we're drinking today. Cheers, Rick.
So yeah, we have a pretty cool brew house. They put this facility in partway through '95, and we're full in production in '96. The lauter tun that you guys are leaning on is from Germany. It's an old Steinecker piece from 1971. It's actually not stainless steel. That's chromed brass.
Oh, really?
Which is pretty cool. You don't see many of those anymore. And then the mash tun and kettle whirlpool are Steinecker design, built in Montreal in '95, and so they're stainless. They're modern, but pretty cool equipment to go through. When we got to do all the collabs with the pod pack guys, they were pretty blown away on the lauter tun because it has brass plates in it and brass rakes, and it's very, very old school piece of history that still makes great beer. Like, that's why our lagers turn out the way they do.
Danny, we thank you for your time. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and letting us into your house.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you guys here and check out the wares and show off where I work.
Chris, I think another great question is, what was the initial beer lineup here at Vancouver Island Brewing? What did VIB come out with first?
Well, because we had German roots and a German brewmaster, shocker, we made lagers. So we had Key Lager, Goldstream Lager, and Herman's Dark Lager, which, at the time, Herman's Dark Lager was like the big, crazy, what the heck is this beer? Because in the, mid 80s, there was pretty much nothing like that out on the market. And then, of course, relying heavily on both where the beer industry was at the time was a very lager heavy, sort of industry, except we were bringing European style lagers, so all grain, brewed in a very traditional sense, not, hey, it's 49% corn and 51%, malt, so we can still call it a beer. So it was very craft at the time, but now today, by today's standards, it'd be like you have 3 lagers. It's more a testament as to where the industry was at, and then where we are today.
So the Herminator beer, very popular, came out for, I think it was a Christmas time specialty at one point.
Absolutely, yeah. So Herminator was started about 31 years ago, and it was originally brewed for Herman's just friends and family, and like friends of the brewery, just to be like, hey, I've got this really unique technique that I can do to kind of make, my Herman's Dark Lager into something much, much more. And so what it is an ice bock. We say ice as an ICE, not EIS, because technically we're not freeze distilling. We're just sub-zero temperature conditioning for many, many months. So we do get quite the layer of ice on our fermentation. But what it really is a very strong Doppelbock that's been conditioned an extra long amount of time. And that in the industry back in 30 plus years ago was one of the craziest things people had ever seen. People weren't even doing seasonals really. So we like to say it was BC's original seasonal beer.
Yeah, that's a cool title.
It is,
That's a nice feather in the cap for sure. So Chris, please take us through the whole rebranding that has come about with VIB and just everything that it took to get to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, we feel we're in a really good place now, but we had an interesting couple-year run right when I first got in here, and it was, partially due to we really felt Vancouver Island Brewing needed a change, needed a shake-up. It was, it had been sold, which is always never a great sign unless it's being sold to a multinational corporation for billions of dollars like Ballast Point. But in general, we're mostly talking about the brewery had been in decline, it needed a refresh, and quite frankly, we just made a terrible move in how far we took that refresh.
Right.
I had a number of people tell me that, the brand was good, just not for Vancouver Island Brewing. It said nothing of the island, and they were right. It wasn't the right brand for what we did. We had this ultra-modern design, a hexagon, kind of even abandoned Vancouver Island and became a much more VI, which a lot of people were like, what the hell is 6?
Yeah.
And all very valid and all very, it was a mistake. It was a wild swing and it was a bold move, but it didn't hit the mark. Luckily for us, we have an ownership group that, is willing to, accept there was a mistake made and move forward and fix it.
So what do you see for the future of Vancouver Island as far as keeping relevant with all the new craft breweries coming up?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it comes in a couple of ways. We, first and foremost, have an innovation pipeline that we call the Title Series. So it gives us an opportunity currently every 2 months, but we may even wrap that up at some point to every month of a new innovative beer, something that's a little bit more risky, a little bit more wacky, something that we can kind of do a one-off batch. And when you see our equipment, you know how big that one-off batch actually is. We work with a 128 hectoliter system. Then we can brew down to about 80 is about as small as we get, but that's, for most breweries, 4 to 8 times the size of their single one-off batches. So there's still a level of responsibility that comes with our Title Series, but it's where we can have a little bit of fun, come up with ideas, and maybe those ideas then graduate into seasonals or core beers. On top of that, we have some pretty cool projects coming out. We have one called the Pod Pack, which is a 4-brewery collaboration. So we're collaborating with 4 small breweries from around the island: Il Sauvage, Land and Sea, Twin City, and White Sails.
Where do you feel and where do you think the craft brewing industry is heading here, not only island-wide, but nationally?
I kind of see it going in twofold. I definitely see it will continue to grow. There's a lot more macro, that we can take down and take and make our own and turn that volume into craft volume. But it's going to be an interesting mix, because I think right now we maybe are a little heavily skewed towards regional size and large craft breweries, just because that's the way it was. Like before tasting room endorsements and lounge endorsements, you really didn't have a choice. You had to be that big or you just wouldn't survive. But now with the lounge endorsement thing and neighborhood breweries, small town breweries, I really see that's where a lot of this industry is going, is, being able to go to literally the brewery in your neighborhood or the brewery in your town and pick up the freshest beer possible. On the converse side, that's one piece of it, but then there is certain things that you can only do on bigger systems: reliability, shelf life, things of that nature. So it's kind of going to be this mix of regional, which is what we do, and larger scale, and centrifuges and 6-month shelf lives and all those kind of great things that you have to have a larger production facility to do, really clean lagers. And it's going to be a mix. We always kind of say we as Vancouver Island Brewing want to be in the beer purchaser's basket. We want to be your reliable 6-pack, and maybe you'll pick up one of our innovations. But we're not just the only thing. We're not delusional to believe we're the only thing in your basket, and that there is a place for your local hometown brewery. And we just want you to consider us alongside with them, because a lot of craft beer purchasers, they buy both.
Chris, give us your final thoughts on Vancouver Island Brewing and what VIB has to offer to the community and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think it's an exciting time. We're a bit of the comeback kids right now, and we got a long way to go, and we got a lot of things to prove, and we understand that. But the passion in this building, the willingness to kind of take on that challenge and prove that we can hang with the best of them, and we can make really innovative beers while still making what we built this brewery on, which is crystal clear, beautiful lagers that will take down any macro, because it's going to be way better than that, because it's local, it's fresh, it's not brewed in Edmonton like some good luck lager. It's truly Vancouver Island's beer and representative of all of it. So from the blue collar worker who just wants something yellow and fizzy and goes down easy, we got that. And then, hey, we have a double dry hop tropical punch, IPA, or a kettle sour, or a Kvike hazy or something. We're willing to play ball on all fields. And I think, with the passion we have in the building and the team that we've been building here, we're going to get there, because, we don't ask you to believe us. We're going to come out and prove it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris,
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Rick.
And I'm Andy.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Danny.
We're here at Vancouver Island Brewery in Victoria, BC, and we've
Been there, tap that.